Okay. So for those of you who have never been down here, this is our local depot for our local techs, our techs that report out of KOP. This is where to get spare equipment. And we built a little app. If you've never been to our customer site, this is typically what you'll see. We see a data rack. In this data rack, we have a Grandstream, 24-port Grandstream, a 2400 series router, and a Cisco PoE switch. So this is our standard setup. For purposes of today with the door boxes, here is the Viking controller box I spoke of. Here is the call box. This is an outdoor box, and I know that just by feeling it. It's metal. And here is a Grandstream that we're using. For this, we're using an 8-port Grandstream, and we are peeling off two lines. One for the overhead paging that we went over about a month ago, for those of you who were here, and a second one, it's labeled call box, which will go into the Viking controller box. So, how it all comes together. We have internet coming in through our router here, right? We have extensions, and we have a Grandstream connected to that router via PoE switch, right? So now we have a LAN connection to our Grandstream. With this Grandstream, we will configure it for an analog dial tone, for an extension that you guys create, soft speed, right? That's why the techs usually call you or email you on the way out that I need my extension, right? They're panicking, right? Because they can't do anything on that Grandstream without that extension on it, all right? So once that's configured, they will test it with a local, what they call a butt set, which is a handheld analog telephone set directly from this Grandstream. If that extension is created properly and the call groups are set up, now no, I guess a lot of you already know, our techs don't have access to the portal. Most of them don't. 90% of them don't have access to the portal. So they don't know how to create call groups. They don't know, they can't even get into it. So they're going to rely on you guys to do that for them, okay? Or sometimes data activations will do that. So they'll definitely need the extension number for you and the call group created for them to get this done. Once that's done, like I said, they'll take that analog set, they'll go off hook on this Grandstream. Once they go off hook, it's the same theory as pressing the call button on this, right? So they're going to want to test directly from here first to make sure that that's working before they move on. So what happens when they go off hook on that analog test set, it should ring the phones that you guys have created in that call group. And they'll talk back and forth. Once they've established that that is working, they'll then move on to the door box, okay? So what they'll do is they will take a piece of cable with a little, what they call an RJ11 head. They will connect it to the call box, and the other end of this cable goes to the Viking controller box. There are 3 connections that we as technicians need to make to this Viking controller box. There's the input dial tone, Grandstream. There's the call box. And the third is going to be the door strike. Can't really see it from that far, but there is 4 different. I mentioned earlier we had one setup where we had 3. There's a possibility of 4 on here. Typically, we're just going to use the 1. So we need to make 3 connections to that. So they'll take a piece of cross connect. They will connect it to the analog input in of this Viking controller box. And then they will take the call box. This is usually mounted on the outside of a door. On a wall face. They will take those leads, connect this to the controller box, and then the door strike. Again, there is no programming on this. There is minimal programming on this thing here. I don't have a screwdriver, but there's a little bank of dip switches here. That kind of tells the Viking controller whether or not we're going to be using, like we mentioned earlier, some of the apartment buildings will have like a regular dial tone. We never use that. We just want to set 2 particular dip switches here. It's 1 through 5. and we want to set switches 1 and 5 on. That indicates that it's the controller unit that we're using an analog dial tone, and that's it. All right. So your connections are made to the Viking controller box from the Grandstream, from the door box, and then lastly to the door strike. I mentioned earlier upstairs that the door strike, there's 2 possible positions. It's normally open or normally closed, which in electrical speak is just, is that device normally in its open state, and when you hit that door box to allow somebody in, it closes, right? Or is it opposite? Is it normally closed, and then once that star is pressed, it opens? Techs know that simply by just taking a piece of wood there, they're actually shorting out that door box. If they short it out and they hear it click, then it's normally open, right? Because they're shorting it, they're closing it. And so that's their little trick to know to do that. So once they've figured out whether or not it's normally open and normally closed, they'll make the proper connections to here, and everything should work. It should work. Probably is that easy, maybe 50% of the time. The other times they're toning back to the door strike. Some of these buildings are old, right? We're going to old schools. We're going to old nursing homes, right? We do a lot of Empire accounts. These nursing homes and these schools are 50 to 100 years old, especially when we get into like Philly and New York and DC. A lot of these buildings are really old. Their wiring from that door strike to how it gets here may have 3 or 4 different stops. Some of these door strikes, I told you there's maybe 50 out in the field, right? They may have been proprietary to the particular setup that they had on their old PBX. We had no way of capturing that on a site survey. So little things like that.
Can the tech know during the site survey if everything's wired correctly or anything like that? They need to have wiring done?
Well, he only knows if it's wired correctly if it's working, right? If it wasn't wired correctly, it wouldn't be working. What they will identify when you go to a customer site in their LAN room, there's typically probably anywhere from 5 to 50 of these types of blocks, and they should be lit. He is going to try to identify something that says door entry, front door, or back door, or in case of overhead page. So he's going to try to identify that for either himself or the other tech that comes back to do the install, and they'll label it. They'll label the BVN, found this door entry 1, door entry 2. That's all they're really going to know.
I think we had some questions on from some of the remote users.
You guys have any questions?
Quick question. I have a customer that has an OHP and also a lower buzzer. Can I use the same Grandstream for both?
Okay. The question was, he has a particular customer that has overhead paging and door box, and whether or not he can use the same Grandstream for both. The answer is yes and no. I hate to be so flip-floppy on you. If it's a 702, then the answer is no. We're going to want 2 702s, right? But if it's a 8-port like here, as you can see, I have overhead paging and a call box on it. So the answer is yes. All right, so they can do it. I guess in short, they can do it as long as it's not a 702.
Which only has the 2 ports.
Why not? Isn't it a 2-port, right? So there's 1 port for OHP and...
Remember the Grand, okay, I'll get into a little bit with Grandstreams. 702 has 2 ports, 704 has 4 ports, and so on. Every time a call comes into that Grandstream or a call goes out, every time a call path is created, it takes up bandwidth. Certain calls require more bandwidth than others. Faxes require a lot of bandwidth. So if you were to take a 702 and you have a fax machine on it already, and the customer wants to get overhead page, and they're like, well, I have an open port on the 702, you can tell them no, because you're not going to have the bandwidth allowable for that. So we always want to leave like at least 1 port available. So if you have an 8-port Grandstream, in theory, I guess rule of thumb is you have 7 ports available to you, right? If you can look at it like that. So I hope that answered your question.
Definitely. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the remote users?
Is that preferred?
Hello?
Whether it would be two
Hi,
choose versus.
I have a question.
Hold on.
My customer has a card system.
Hold on.
Can you hear me?
Try it.
Yeah. My customer has a card system. I just wanted to know how do we integrate it with the door box?
Okay, one more time with that.
Yes. My customer has a card system, and I'd like to know how do we integrate it with our door box.
Okay. The question was, they have a particular customer that has the key fob, and they want to integrate it with the door box. The answer to that is that it's two separate systems. And explain that to the customer. We have no control over that key fob system. If they have an existing system that does it both, some of them do, let them know that they're going to have to get an alarm vendor or their security vendor involved in that, because we see this a lot with schools, we can only split off the door entry system as it relates to a door buzzer and an entry. You can't do the key fob. If they're integrated now, somebody needs to unintegrate them. We'd be happy to do that for them, but we won't be able to get their key fob working, right? We'd be able to disconnect that. Another instance I ran into was a school. A lot of the schools, for security reasons, will keep all their doors closed or locked during school session, but they'll have a camera, right, so they can see that. We don't have that feature. Some of the other VoIP systems have little videos on their screen. We don't have that. So if they're going for something like that to our office suite, they're going to lose that video capability.
They can have a separate system, still do the video.
They'd have to have another vendor come in and rewire that into like a camera system.
Right.
It's a separate camera system, possibly a separate fob system, or door box.
Right. Yeah.
Security where it is, with all your whistles.
Card system.
All right. Are there any other questions from the remote users? Richard.
Yeah, typically on a job, we do an install one day and we're sending out a tech, and a lot of times we'll then send a technician out for the report. We install the door buzzer and we're doing it too. We install the door buzzer at the install. And there's an issue. Does that necessarily hold up and we can correct it at the port? Or once we install the door buzzer at the install, is it working and they can do away with their old?
They can, yeah.
If there's an issue, we can correct it at the port.
Yeah.
Once maybe we got to get another piece of equipment or get the vendor on site.
And we don't, you know, we like to do our installs in 3 different steps. We like to do our surveys, our installs, and then our ports.
Mhm, yeah, that's how I do it.
So the door boxes, the installation would be part of the install. When we go out on the install with the door box, we prefer to get that working as a part of our install task. So in other words, we'll get the phones, if they have a call group set up, we'll get working phones at all those desks where those call groups are. And from the time our technicians leave that site on the install phase, their door entry system is now on Broadview. So that when we go back to do the port, that's all we're doing. That's all the guys doing is just going to port numbers. It works out for us. Quite frankly, we have techs that are junior and senior, different skill sets, and no fault of their own, but you know that's part of my job to train them up, right? So when dispatch sees a job that's just a voice cut, it's who's ever available, quite frankly. But when it's an install with door boxes, they're going to look for one of their senior techs to get out there. So with that being said, the senior tech that's doing that install will make sure that that door box is up and working and exclusively on Broadview before he goes into that and says, I'm done with it.
Harry, you had a question, right?
Just what's preferred by the techs. Would they rather have two separate grand streams if there's two separate devices, or would they rather just have one?
Two separate devices. What do you
Like
feel like
a
they're-
green screen or
Like
two
if they
separate
were
screens.
doing a door box and overhead page, or would they rather everything go into one grand stream or have two separate ones?
They would have no problem with everything going to one grand stream as long as it's an 8-port grand stream. But keep in mind that a lot of these data rooms aren't as open as this, and we're restricted with power. So if you have 2 grand streams, you're going to need 2 power sources.
Gotcha.
So,
Okay.
you know, again,
Again, I think the big glaring thing is to make sure that it's larger than a 2-port, it's a 4-port or an 8-port.
Right.
If you're adding more than one door box or
Yeah.
overhead paging unit, do that.
Definitely.
not only power, I mean, we need switch ports, right? You always hear tech saying, I don't have enough switch ports for this, you know, and that's what.
Right, right.
So there really isn't a problem. They just want it to work. They you know,
Yeah,
they have,
obvious.
yeah.
I just didn't know how far, like, would it always go in their telecom room, or would it be like somewhere near to the back door versus front door? So I think that I
Well-
was in my head going, well, maybe I want to send them two. I want to give them options, but not if it's always going to be there and need two power.
Yeah, you're going to need to power it too. And also a lot of our customer sites that we go into, right, they have a PBX room, or what they call their voice room, and they have a LAN room. They're not all one. So, and a lot of the times, the PBX always control the door boxes, right? So their door entry system and their wiring for the door entry system would be in their PBX room. Now that we're putting VoIP in there, we need data connections. So now we have to make connections, right? So if you're going to use multiple grand streams, they're going to have to run multiple cables. So
Gotcha.
again, they're going to be specific, right? Because you know, they're,
Simplicity is-
they-
That's part of the
so I said, yeah, they're going to be they're going to spell everything out for you. And if they don't, please let me know, because not only is it not fair to you, not fair to the customer, it's not fair to the other techs who are going to have to go back and do that. Again, I told you maybe some of our junior techs are going out to do the voice cut. They may also go out and do the second surgery. They know enough to identify that kind of stuff, you know. So, you know, some of their, you know, they kind of run their own. They kind of handle their own. So if one of the, you know, the older guys would be like, geez.
That tech coming before, send you your Alex. Okay. Like, everything looks good, but I'm not sure what the door buzzer is. Let me check it out again.
Gainer and Alex there.
What virus is it?
You guys ever met James Grotti? He just got promoted. He's my new lead tech down here. I took him out of the field, and he's now my guy. He's,
Okay, so he's going to do all my work now.
yeah. James Grotti's really sharp. He's
Not here
not working.
today. Guess the man's got to work.
Here's one of my jobs.
Bill Haver's one of my guys.
Right?
Bill Haver's one of the good. He's a keeper.
He's helping out a lot.
He's definitely a keeper.
Bill was like Yater.
All right. Well, do we have any more questions? Guys, any more questions on the phone?
Last one.
Last one. Okay, go for it.
I have a customer who has a, you know, the same door buzzer, but they're still trying to determine which extensions will be adding the door buzzer feature on their phones. Can that be done during the install date, or is that critical that I have that prep
What the extension?
before that install date? Yes, the extension that would have that door buzzer feature on their phones. Is that something that could be done by the tech on
No,
site?
That's
Coordinate.
portal work. That'll have to be done through the portal, right? So our techs won't have access to the
They
portal.
need that to do the work, actually.
Yeah, so just to dive in, it's vital that we have extensions created for your service, whether it's door buzzer, overhead paging, extensions per phone. That all needs to be set up before you send a tech to the site.
What if it's the customer that's totally stalling because they don't have the correct info?
Make it up.
Then
Yeah,
If
what I
the
would suggest,
customer
yeah, give
is-
us something just so we could, test our door box, and then what we call like the cosmetics of it, maybe moving it to a different button or something. We'll let you and the customer go back about that after the day. But we just want to test the functionality of the application first.
Okay, so that's something that the tech cannot do on site, and
no, absolutely
Oh,
not. It's
got
really the PM's responsibility to make sure that's all built prior to you sending a tech. In fact, your guys who are scheduling you, and I'm talking to Dan right now, are going to stop the job if they catch missing extensions in soft speed and or in the sill. So if you have an urgent issue that your customer's like, well, I need somebody to come out here regardless of if I've given you extensions or not, I would say that would be a question for your manager. But again, for the purpose of service delivery, you have your extensions built before you send a tech.
Copy that.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Guys, any other questions on the phone?
Just one real quick, Dom.
Yep.
About the same topic, door buzzers. Are we like allowed to work on extensions from the controller to the door box? I mean, let's say for example the customer doesn't have any wiring towards the where the door is, so could field services work on extensions for like that, or?
Well, you can create an extension. Yeah,
No, cabling. I'm talking about cabling. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm confused. What was he?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat your question?
No, actually, I was talking about physical extensions, like
Why?
from the door box to the controller. Let's say, for example, during the site survey, our tech discovers that the customer doesn't have any existing wiring from the, let's say, the telco, or excuse me, the server room to the door that will allow our door box to connect to the controller. So are we allowed to
Okay. So what the tech can
install?
do, he can install and he can test directly from the door box, like in the room, like I was telling you before, like he can on the grand stream. He could test and make sure that call group is working. But when we're talking door entry systems, again, we're talking voltage for the door strike. There's no way of knowing that it's going to work in the end. We'd rather wait and hold off on an install until all that wiring is done. We'd like to do it all in one shot.
But that the wiring itself is not something that our Broadview tech is going to do. That needs to be, again, door strike and wiring for the door buzzer system needs to be in place prior to Broadview dispatching to the site to install it.
Understood. Okay.
Okay?
Got it.
Lots of good questions here, guys. Any more?
Yeah, know that wiring going to the door strike is not your typical Cat 5 type wiring. That's it's not low voltage. That's a different. That's something an electrician would have. Even if we wanted to, if OSHA was to walk in, we wouldn't do that. All right. Is there anything else? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.